Okay.
Hi, good morning. Welcome everyone. And it's a pleasure to have here today Dr. Abel Laoui from Wearable Genomics talking to us about the digital revolution of personalized and powered health. Dr. Laoui is an international senior executive with 20-plus years experience in R&D interfacing between the life sciences and technologies in U.S., EMEA, and APAC. Dr. Laoui's expertise is primarily in the pharmaceuticals and healthcare technologies, as well as big data analytics, which focus on delivering healthcare for sustaining a good quality of life for the patients as well as the caregivers. He also wears another hat, a business hat. He has an MBA in finance and marketing and business strategies, and is involved in developing models for complex integrated healthcare solutions. He's been actually his background is he worked for a big pharma company where he was instrumental in 2 anti-cancer successes that are making more than $5 billion a year now. And he is the founder and CEO of Wearable Genomics, obviously. That is actually, I think he's going to talk a lot more about it. But I was fascinated when I first met him and learned about it, which basically is a company that lies at the crossroads of digital health and data analytics. And with that, I'll hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. Thank you so much. I think and good morning, everyone. I think I'm really excited to be here in this great university. And thanks, really, Hamid, for this invitation to give this seminar. So we have my company. We have actually a great team of scientists, going from genomics, to pharmaceuticals, to people knowing really the healthcare system. It's an early startup actually in San Diego. We just actually closed our seed round at $1.2 million, and now we're moving to the Series A, but we'll be raising like $20 million, I think, in this area. So it's a very, very important area, I think, what is developing right now in this area of digital health. And if I can start with a statement, our human body is readable, right? Is now readable. We can actually read the code. And when I'm saying the code, it's really in a very large sense. I think whether it's your DNA, but all these physiological parameters you can actually read from our body. And of course, we can analyze it, make sense of it, and of course, in the future, hopefully change it for the better. So, and this is really something, I think, which is very important because it's going to revolutionize, I think, the way we are really thinking about health. And as you know, health, I think there's different influences. And I was really struck, actually, hearing some of this Hamid student this morning, and some of them talking about this social, the media behavior in terms of predicting this behavior across these different layers. This is exactly what you have actually in health. I think it's not just our genome, of course, this is the foundation, I think, of all what we are, I think, in terms of health. I don't know if you know, but we are a hosted organism. It's interesting to see it's just 10% actually of our body of human DNA. 90%, it's actually bugs DNA. It's all this bacteria, I think, we're having, I think, in our body. And the microbiome, they call that the microbiome. It's a very important aspect also, I think, nowadays, for the simple reason we can have access to this information as well. I think all along the organs, you have actually an ecosystem of bacteria, which now, because we can sequence it, I think, very rapidly, we can actually have access to this information. And a lot of this ecology of bacteria population, I think, is now seen as one of the drivers of some of the disease. And one of the use cases I'm going to talk today, cystic fibrosis, is really one of them. So, of course, the medical, history is important more and more, but behavior, the way we interact socially, and of course our environment. I think this is all the layers basically which need to be addressed, and of course the challenge, how to put it all together, and then connect the dots across actually all these different layers. So, but fortunately, there's like really these conversions and these transformations of the technologies across actually many different trends. I think when you're thinking about how I can actually get all this information across these different layers, this technology is going to really enable and to do that in the future. So whether it's mobile, so anything you do now right now, think mobile first. I think that this is really something, this era of desktops, I think servers, etc. Of course, I think still important from the back-end point of view, but like from the customer facing now, you need to think mobile, right? I think that's very important. The cloud, yeah, I know, I think it's a big university. There's a lot of decentralized server, but now being hosted, there's a lot of resources which can be used. You don't need to have actually your own computer, especially for the small businesses like us, right? Social is going to be really important wherever I think you do. The population level, it's not just about a single individual. I think you need to think really community. All these social networks are very important. And of course, I think this analytic piece, right? I think wherever, I used to say, wherever the data we produce, if you're a data producer, we're producing a lot of data. This data is going to be commoditized. The value, I think, of this data is really the kind of insight you're going to grab. So the people working in this area, there's really a lot of challenges. I saw really some very nice example, I think, from Hamid's groups this morning. So just to give you some numbers, right, about this transformation of this digitalization, basically, of technology, mobile phones. We are the stage now where more than 1.3 billion phones, smartphones actually in the world. So this is really a big transformation. Thinking about social network, I think we talked that with Shaheen, right? I think the amount of resources of applications, and of course, I think the way you can actually then use them to predict how people interact, behave, is going to be a very important aspect in the future. So the wearable devices, I think that this is, I think now this diversity of devices, and coming back to what I was saying in the beginning, the human body is readable, right? But the key aspect, I think, is really this continuous monitoring, is this real life stream of data, which really just impacting all this, the overwhelm, basically, the world to think about the kind of data we can generate for health purposes. And again, I think summing up all these things is this really this increasing diversity and this ever-expanding ecosystem of devices, apps, services, which really generate, I think, this huge volume of information, which, of course, I think represents some very big challenges for us. The Internet of Things. I think it's interesting to look at this kind of picture, when you're comparing, the amount of people on the planet with the connected device. I think it's around actually 2008 that we have, to some extent, more connected device, I think, than human. Right now, it's actually a factor of almost 7. So I think this era of connected devices, and it's becoming, I think, even more prominent in the medical side. They call that the Internet of Medical Things, because of all these connected devices, which can be, of course, I think, be integrated in many health and medical applications. So, and of course, with all of this, I think this huge amount of digital traces, I think everybody basically is living now in this everyday life. And of course, I think how we're going to, create value from all this huge volume of information is going to be really one of the challenge for the next generations of people. So, but one of the challenge, of course, I think most, and especially in the area of health, most of the health data, whether it's ignored, I think to some extent, and I'm pretty sure, I think a lot of us, we don't have actually our health data, portable to some extent. But or they are just functioning unavailable. It's not really easily shareable. And the reason is because it's all this disconnected system, which are siloed, and that doesn't make it really easy for you to grab, I think, wherever your lab results information, so wherever your genetic information, or wherever the data you're collecting, I think, through your devices, to get it in one place under your ownership, and you control the use of it. So, and the things is also, the diversity of the data type. I think this is really a big problem. I'm just going to show you some of the stuff, right? I think in all this area of physical activity data, you have all these different kind of solutions, and each of them, they have their own standards, the kind of format, which is not making it, of course, I think, easy for people to get that. In the social world, in all this aspect of weighting data, and just really some represented in the area of genomics is now thousands of the genomics providers, so with their own format, their own solution, nutritional data, so the same things. So coming back, even the worst thing is really one of the precious, location where we are storing all the data is all this electronic medical record. You have different players there, and of course, nobody want to share his data with the other guy. And you're going to all these different guys. So you're going in different institutions, they have this different solution, and then they don't share actually this information. And of course, I think the environment, and this is where I think it's still a big gap, how we can capture, I think, in a portable way and make it that usable, I think, for people. This is the picture of today. And you can imagine, of course, I think the challenge, I think, to get all this information. But the technology is helping, and we are really in the way, I think, to get this data collected and aggregated. And another thing, again, coming back, Shaheen, I think, to this kind of layers, I think, to better understand the health, right? We need to change our reasoning. Across, talked about these different layers, which are really key influences about the health of people, whether it's environmental, your personal data, or your behavior. You shouldn't just think, I think, horizontally. For example, if you are thinking about diabetes management, you need really to look at across these three different layers. Whether it's your physical activity, your medical record, and what you eat, right? The same things with asthma care. I think it's also a lot of genetically driven disease. There's a lot of drugs already, but the way you go, you travel, the pollutions, the environment is going to be very important, basically, just to manage actually asthma in the future. So the obesity, the level of the stress, I think, of course, I think your diet, but also your weight is going to be really important, I think, to manage obesity in the future. So I think the point here is we have all these multiple layers, which are really a key, I would call that biometrics, which is going to determine actually your health. But you need to think now, I think, this across the layers to have a better understanding of the true health of a person. So, and the culture also, I think we are in this culture of big data. So I used to, as Hamid said, I worked at more than 25 years in a big pharma. And the last 10 years, I think we have been through all this huge kind of high throughput something, whether it's genomics, biology, chemistry, etc. And we have really solved actually the problem of the big data at that time. What's really changing right now, it's all this real stream, continuous amount of data coming in, which is certainly, I think, put it like, at a different scale. So it's one thing, so we need really to think, I think, from this big data perspective, but also really the culture of health when it comes, how we can better, relate all these different, actually, parameters from all these different layers, and having this idea how we can actually relate or determine a particular cause across actually these different dimensions. And as we said, right, our life expectancy is really depending on all these different components. But if you're just getting down, for example, for asthma, it's a piece of this. You know, it's a piece of there, it's a piece of this, etc. So how can we relate all these dots together and just building some of these causal relationships really just going to impact the way we are going to understand health and deliver care in the future. And of course, I think when it comes to health, it's really all across these big chronic conditions, which we are looking to use some of this really advanced learning analytic techniques. Again, I think I saw some very nice example today, which is going to help us better understand all these chronic diseases in the future. And of course, I think when you're thinking now, oh, it's a big stuff, right? I think it's not a small problem. We're thinking of the problem at that stage. Like we understood, you know, that our health is not just our medical condition, but you need to integrate all these different layers and connect all these dots together. And this is when you do that, yeah, I think you are really going to enable this era of personalized medicine and more actually providing a better health outcome for people. So, just coming back to the business side now, I think if we are able to digitalize this data across these different health layers, you know, it's already a big market across these different segments. The people working in wireless devices, the sensors, people in the analytics, in all this social data analytics. It's already $60 billion in 2013. So I think it's, from the business-wise, of course, I think it's very growing, and it's going around to 230 actually in 2020. So, and this is where then I think as a company, you know, Portable Genomics, which is a small startup company, really looking to digitalize and make it easy for people to collect all these key informations, again, in a portable device, I think in your mobile phone. This is really a true tools now, which everybody, it's basically embedded, it's embedding the lifestyle of people. Having this tool, now it's really going to change a lot, I think, in the future. But think mobile, you know, things, you know, it's not just the data, how it can actually get this insight and more actually personalized, right? And then also how it can enable the sharing of this data. And I will describe, I think, some of these really disruptive business models with this meaningful goal, right? How we can actually all improve, I think, the quality of life of people. And we already have architected a solution there, which really, and I'm going to show you, I think, the use cases we have been using for the specific community of disease. And the way we are doing it, and that's also, I think, really a big change. We need to empower the users. In the sense, right now, the only option you have a lot of services which can actually be provided like for free, right, most of the time. But the hidden, I would say, compensation there is basically your data. You're giving up actually your data. There's a hidden monetization of this data. So really, the kind of business developing the model we're developing, we want actually to give back the ownership and actually the control of the use of the data to people. So all the technology which has been designed, none of the data, it's actually stored in our server. It's stored actually in your mobile device. So, and this is the kind of data we are generating, just coming back to this holistic health. It's not just about genomics or genetic blueprints, but it's also about your medical history, your behavior, and all these lifestyle sensors, which are really key to manage actually your condition. And as I said, you know, as a data provider, really need to design upfront this data is going to be commoditized. Right now, yeah, genomics is not so easy, but it's getting more affordable, so we can actually have more of it. But all these things, I think, is going to be commoditized. In 2 years, the genomics, your genome is going to be like your cholesterol kind of biometrics, right? That it's going to be given whether by your employer or by the insurance company, etc. Genomics is going to be commoditized. So, and this is where the information, and of course, I think what I'm hearing, what I heard actually from Hamid's group, is really going to be very important. You know, how I can actually now, having this aggregate data, make sense of it, so I can actually act on it. And that's really something which is important. So we are developing now a sort of deep learning intelligence platform, and we're looking, of course, I think, to collaborate with a really bright organization like yours here, just to provide some of these innovative analytic solutions. But the other things, just think about that now. So we are putting basically your health in your own hand. Okay, you can control, you have the ownership of this data, we can actually control the use of it. Then we can enable this, right? We can enable people to share, and the increased awareness of your personal health data, it's actually an asset, and it's certainly the most valuable asset actually you can have. Though basically you can then create value from it, right? But having this ability and enabling people to share this data, and even for sharing it for profit purposes, you can actually co-monetize this data in the future. And I'm going to talk about this business model, I think, which is very disruptive. Doesn't exist yet actually in the healthcare, but I'm sure, I think, you're going to, I think, give it a thought. So let me just move, I think, to these, after this big introduction and the big challenges, how you can actually make it happen. I think it's, as an entrepreneur, of course, it's about, let me just go small, and then I can scale it afterwards. And the small things here is really a community of disease who came to us with huge problem. That's the cystic fibrosis community in San Diego. There are around actually 250 families there, and which are really, struggling with the amount of the data across, I think, some of these key biometrics which are really important to their condition, how we can develop like a portable solution for this particular community of patients. So, and this is not the easiest one we start with, because these doctors, the researchers, and the patients, we know that they come to us, but this is the kind of complexity you can imagine. This is the kind of dream dashboard who's going to capture the data coming from these different sources. Whether it's a device, the spirometry, for example, is really giving you this kind of functional capacity of the lungs, so which is a key, of course, metrics of the driving their disease. The drug treatment or the lab result, for example, is very important. It's very complex. Their genetics and genomics, and I'm talking about the microbiome. So for this community of disease, the lung microbiome, I think, has been shown to be the driver of severity of the disease of the phenotype. So having a good understanding, what is going on in your bacteria ecosystem in the lung, in the organ of the lungs, is going to be very important for managing these conditions. And there's a lot of comorbidity, as most of the time with this kind of community. They don't, the absorptions of the traditional nutrition, I think it's not really well accepted there, but so they are taking a lot of supplement, for example, to expurge the mucus actually from their lungs. They're doing a lot of physical activities, 2-3 hours per day. So, and they're using a lot of lifestyle sensors, basically, to capture all this different information. And of course, I think one of the aspects which is also important about this empowerment of user is also let them create their biometrics which are relevant to them. Because and that's also something which is really important. And of course, I think we have discussed and designed the specs, I think, in terms of the key functionality is going to be in the product. But really the dream thing is, let me grab that in my mobile device, across all these key biometrics which are important to manage my condition, so then I can actually be proactive, can see what is going on, I can actually interact and communicate better with my healthcare providers. And that was actually the initial goal, I think, we have with this community. And this is why we put that. We put that in the mobile device. I think here in this area, it's a navigation panel of all these key biometrics, which has been shown to be very important. Here, it's a connected device, for getting this spirometry information, the lung functional capacity. Here, it's all the access to all these medical systems. It's at UCSD. They have an EMR, electronic medical record system there. How to make it easy to get all their medication, the lab result, etc., in their mobile device again. So the microbiology, we talk a lot about that. This one is more actually for the the microbiome, the metagenomics. I think right now it's mainly manual because this is pretty something which is new. It's basically the people that are getting some clinical sample from the lung, and you have all this processing of the sequencing, etc., to get finally what kind of bacteria is there. And most of the time, of course, it's very different from the microbiology testing because usually they're testing 2 or 3 bacteria, and sometimes I think the disease which is driven is actually by another bacteria, which is actually can be found actually by the microbiome. So, but this is making it easy to collect, document the health of people. That's where we are right now for this particular community. So, and of course, I think the important things now is, you know, can I have a picture, you know, of the status of my health, right? And we work with the doctors, researchers, etc., to define like the business rules to see for each of these biometrics when you are within the range or after the range, just give you like a picture of the current state, I think, of your health. And this is just a dashboard. And again, make it simple. You go from vertical, you know, to horizontal. You get actually the dashboard with all this key information about these key biometrics. And now, of course, the power of this digitalization, can you imagine now I can actually slide and look at the longitudinal information, what happened last week, last month, and so on and so forth. And of course, coming back to what I was saying, now we can enable sharing this information. It's sharing it real time. I'm at my doctor, at the point of care, wherever I am. I can actually share this information right away. I can write reports, I think, in real time. So making it, of course, I think, easy for people, I think, just to have this better communication with their healthcare provider. Another aspect which is really important in this area is really the use and the evangelizations of genetics information. I think right now, I think it's very complex. I think just for people to understand their genetic information, make it easy, I think is going to be one also of the important things, educate them, but also finally having access to this data. And this is where we have actually some patent and IP about the use and management and visualization actually in mobile device. This is the result of one of these genomics providers. There's for this community of disease, there's around 200 actually mutation for among 2 or 3 genes. And the idea is really how we can make available this information and also, you know, helping people to better understand their mutations. So for example, for that particular patient, this is the mutation he has, right? And having the information among the 30,000 people in the United States, there's actually 10% of people having this kind of mutation. And you can have, of course, this kind of tailored and targeted information for all these different mutations. The other things is we are now, everything is digitalized, right? You can really provide targeted and real-time actual information for that person. I have this mutation. I know it's driving actually the phenotype, the severity of disease. I'm different from a guy who's going to have this mutation, right? So having this targeted and personalized information with this kind of solution now is really doable, and we are making it basically happen in the real world. So again, of course, I think it's one thing, as I said, to collect and aggregate and make it easy for people, educate them, provide these services, personalized services, etc. But the key thing is now, you know, how we can act on it, how we can learn from this community of disease. This is just a recent article which just came out actually last year, and we have been working with Dr. Conrad, who's actually the guy taking care of this 250 family, and have been following these 111 patients for the last 3 years across these different biometrics. And really the idea, can we identify, I think that was Sally, right? Clustering, you know, is a very important point here because can I identify some of these phenotype classes? And of course then when you're able to do that, you can actually look at, I think, from the application point of view for different purposes, because right now, I think the healthcare, the way it's set up, basically, we don't know the population which is higher risk versus, let's see, I think, the rest of the population. With these kind of things, you can do that. Now, I think the doctor, he can focus, actually, you know, on this particular population, which is a higher risk. Of course, for each of these phenotype classes, like these different drug or treatment regimen. You can really derive like the best practices, why this particular regimen works for this particular phenotype class versus the other one. Coming back to the drug discovery, now you can be much more intelligent in stratifying actually your patient and actually sending the appropriate people for the appropriate treatment. But really, when you're thinking about what we are doing here about this holistic care, is really to do that. How actually can I relate or establish some causality between the genotype to phenotype, so you can identify some of these surrogate biomarkers, which can be used really, as I said, as like it's sort of key digital biometrics, basically to follow and monitor the overall health of people. So this is the reason we are doing this, right? It's the technology is good, you know, facilitating the education, the empowerment of people. So it's, of course, I think the ultimate goal is really how we can actually derive a better health outcome for people. Okay, so just very quick information about our product. It's already tested now. We have been working with around 20 people in San Diego. Now we're scaling the entire community of CF. As I said, there's 30,000 the people overall. So by the way, there's 3,000 people here in North Carolina, I think, with CF. So the idea now, we are going to launch, I think, this product across this community here. From the go-to-market, I think the way we have designed this technology in a generic way, so you can actually customize easily from one condition to another. Obviously, the biometric is going to be different if you're going to cancer or rare disease, for example. But of course, in the same time, and I'm going to describe this this new business model I'm talking about, a lot of people, they would be interested by the kind of data you would be holding and controlling in your mobile device. Of course, one of them is, you know, for the good things, right? I think you have this issue of this condition, how we can derive drug discovery solution basically for my condition. And we are, of course, working with a lot, I think, the industry side. But at the end, you know, this is a tool that's going actually to be for the consumer. You know, I want to know about my health. I want to collect the appropriate information. I want to control actually this data because it's my data. You know, and I want to actually, sure, leverage, if I want, I think, the use of this data. And I'm going to describe that very quickly. I'm just saying just some information about we can scale, right? Start small, solve, you know, establish the value, I think, for a use case, and then you can scale. Here there's more than 1,000 kind of I would say from chronic to rare disease conditions. And of course, a lot of them, when they come back, I think, to genomics, actually there's very few of them who have this genetic background information. And that's really important, and especially in oncology, which is now sort of the era of personalized medicine. But actually a lot of people, they don't know about their genetic risk, for example. And there's now, again, coming back to producing this data, it's not anymore, I think, a problem of money, etc. It's more a problem of educations and actually educating the physician, you know, understand it and actually use it. So we can scale. This is just the early adopters. As I said, I think we're working with cystic fibrosis and cancer. This is one of my really close to heart because I discovered the taxotere, I think, for the breast cancer here during my PhD. That's a product which has been 15 years actually in the market. I think, of course, I think I'm very sensitive to all this, but to ovarian cancer and more also the rare disease. The power of this kind of platform, you can really gather the community together across actually the planet. Okay, the attraction, I think from customer, I think it's interesting always to look at who's actually coming to you. And as you can see, when you're developing this kind of digital health platform, it's really a lot of actually interested people now because everybody's coming to get basically a piece of the market share. The life science, it makes sense, right? The diagnostic industry, obviously, of course, the hospital, the institutions, but now more and more actually a lot of companies in this Internet of Things, right? We are producing new sensors, new devices, which can be used to manage a particular conditions. And of course, a lot of people in this era of getting to this area. So just the business size, you know, it's always one thing to develop a solution is always, of course, as an entrepreneur, to think about a new business model. And for the people who want to start actually an entrepreneur kind of venture, when you're thinking about a startup, really, finally, what is the bottom line, I think, for a start, is really to find a new business model. You know, the established business model, they're not going to move. The pharma, they will be keeping the dough in their stuff, I think, etc. They don't want to move. So the startup is really about, can I find a new business model? And this is exactly what we have been doing. So the platform we have developed here for CF, as I showed, I think we can scale it to the other conditions. We can provide the analytic services for people who want to actually learn about their data and act on it. And the other piece I think I wanted to describe, which is very new, is this aspect of now that you own your data, you control the use of it, you know, and you can share it, you can actually exchange it for, you know, non-profit or for-profit purposes. And that's the last piece I think I want to describe. And just want to give you, you know, how much actually you are worth in terms of personal health data, and when it comes in particular to genomics. This is just some of the example last year, just happened last year, where 23andMe, you know, it's this genomics company who are providing this genetic risk across almost 250 conditions. They sold, you know, for Genentech, 3,000 patients with just the Parkinson disease genetic markers for $60 million, which means if you were a person who get his 23andMe information and you bear this risk, this just Parkinson risk, you were actually worth actually $20,000. And it's not an outlier. There's other conditions like Pfizer for IBD, for example. Actually, the most even striking is the one I think with the foundation we are working on. This is the CF Foundation, who was actually sharing the information about their members, so around 28,000 for the last 10 years. And actually Pfizer, Vertex just came out with a drug just last year which solved 5%, the problem of the 5% of the population, just for a particular mutant which has been developed. And they gave them back just last year upfront royalties $3.2 billion, which make it basically over these last 10 years, a CF patient in this community was worth actually $10,000. So the point here, yeah, your personal health data is an asset, and it has a dollar value at the end. Okay, so what do we do with this? Now that we understand, of course, I think how we are going to generate and provide, I think, this, what I call this high content and high value information, right? So again, we are at this age where we can actually collect all this information across these different layers of determinants of health. And the genomics, of course, right now it's really valuable, but also in the context of the phenotype, it's even more valuable. I'm coming from the life science, the pharma, many years. If I'm giving this platform to Hamid, and he's collecting his information across this, the three different kind of biometrics for the 3 months, that's a lot of money for some of these big guys in the, from the industry side. So the idea, how we can enable a community of patients, but also a community of users, I think, in the future, to collect this high content and high value information under, again, the control, and that's really something which is important, so they can opt in to some extent. Yeah, I think if there's like a monetary kind of proposal, it could be part of it, and you will be getting a piece of it. So, and just think about that, right? You know, if you're thinking about an individual asset, the kind of asset we have, you know, we have a house, we have a car, we have services, we have money, and for each of these assets, actually there's an established market for it. Right? How market, you know, job market, stock market, etc. But when you're thinking about perhaps the most precious actually asset we have, which is our personal health data, right? Actually, we don't create value from it, right? And we think it's really like an astounding and profitable business opportunity in the future. And this is the way we are forward-looking, I think, to these kind of things, right? You know, as a user, as a customer, I think when you own this data and you control the use of it, yeah, at some stage I'm interested to opt in just actually to this market, which we call this personal health data market exchange. You can expose your data there. There will be, believe me, a lot of people who are going to be interested by the kind of data, right? And one of the disruptive business model, again, is we're going to be very transparent, and the business model, if there's any monetary revenue, I think it's going to be generated by this, a piece of this money is going to give back to you. So that's really something which is different, and that's something we are already working on in terms of proof of concept with the rare disease foundations, help them, which is really a big problem for this small foundation, because most of the time they don't have the right data, or I mean the traction from the pharma to do drug discovery, for example, in their disease. So we're helping them getting this high content and high value information so they can attract the industry to do drug discovery. But in the other side, also they have a problem of funding. Actually, they are raising money each year just to fund research for their disease, etc. So the ability to provide this data and then share it and monetize it is also another important aspect for this foundation. So as a company, we'll be basically a market maker, so to some extent. So this is just for us, I think, in terms of small company, it's more the business side. As I said, I think we are in this now Series A round. I think we have very interested, actually, investors in this area. We'll be raising $6 million, I think, by the end of this month. This is just the milestone I think I was describing. Basically, the first solutions is really this first product I think we want to put in the marketplace. The second is finding the right partnership for the analytics side, so how she can make sense of it. And the third one is really all this data exchange platform transaction things that we're going to have. And again, this is really the era of this multiple kind of value I think we are proposing here. Of course, I think the most important thing is how we can actually optimize this patient outcome across all these important chronic and rare health conditions. The second is really we're going to enable, I think, a new way of delivering care for people. So, and of course, in the same times, I think we are going to provide also like additional revenue, I think, for the people who are willing to share and monetize their data. I used to see, just in conclusions, what we are looking forward is getting people be well and be rich. I think I'm going to stop there, and I'm looking forward actually just to hear your questions. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
One thing you mentioned. Just ask it. I'll just think of one. I'm just working on one. You mentioned getting information from like doctors and providers because everything they have proprietary, and then also returning it back to them so in a way that they can use it, so you can ultimately benefit the health of the patient. How do you see the providers adopting this and moving toward, taking the time and cost to get,
This is a very important question, and this is where the other component I didn't talk really a lot about is regulation. It's basically since last year, April, actually, it was April, I think, in 2015, the regulation is forcing now every healthcare system to provide this output electronic data directly to the patient. He doesn't need to go through his doctor. Of course, the doctor is getting it, of course, but for the first time now, all these EMRs, for example, they have developed what the standard output they call the blue button. I don't know if you heard about it, blue button. It's actually standardized output of electronic data for patient directly. So that's true. If the regulation is not pushing it, it's not going to happen. So 95, of course, I think they have anticipated this regulation for the last 3 or 4 years, right? 95% of all these hospital healthcare institutions have now this standard established. then let's make it different. You don't need to go through your actually doctor to get this data. You can go directly to those guys. You know, I want to my last lab result. I don't need actually to wait for my doctor. I can get an electronic copy. Then you can use it or for different purposes. In whatever the platform, we think there's meaningful services like, for example, portable genomics. But the point is now we are empowering people, even at a regulation level, to own actually their data. And that's a big movement there. Otherwise, you're right. Otherwise, those guys, they want to give you your data. It's your data. It's like, you know, you're putting money in the bank. It's actually not your money. This is the current system, really, in healthcare. But now the regulation is also pushing that and working a lot with the FDA, the ONC, for example. So they want to get this kind of innovation in the marketplace and give them an option for people. No, it's a very, very important question. Yeah?
I don't know if I understood you correctly. You gave the examples of 23andMe selling the Parkinson's market.
Yeah.
That means the personal data of those 3,000 patients and the proceeds from that went to 23andMe?
Of course, you got nothing. Because you sign up, when you actually get this $99 box, the dollar test, and you get this result, you sign up that basically this data can be used by 23andMe for citizen research, of course, who doesn't want to do citizen research, but also for private partnership. You sign that.
So that's somewhere down the terms and conditions?
Yeah, of course, you don't see it. It's not transparent, and that's the things we want to disrupt. It's not fair, I think, and especially in this area when you're really thinking, you know, the irony about this system. I'm going to 23andMe and paying $99. For the good things, see, they sell that to Genentech. I'm getting zero. That's my data. It's one of the pieces, $20,000, by the way, getting zero. The Genentech, of course, doing the right things. It's developing a drug, right? And it's coming back to you, and you are, for cystic fibrosis, for example, you're paying $200,000 a year, right? The irony, you're screwed up from the start, you know, and we think we need to disrupt this kind of business model. And the kind of business model where I'm just summarizing here, it's basically, it's interesting because when you're thinking about, and I like that, you know, it's a fair trade model. Basically, the sickest guys, the guys who are spending the most money to take care of themselves, that's actually the guys who are going to get the most money from this. And I think it's fair.
So everything sounds very ideal. So my question is, what are the limitations of the product which could be overcome only when there are advancements in the health gadgets or in, say, the genomics?
Okay, so first of all, it's something real, right? For the CF community. We did that for them. The challenges we have is, went through all this, as I said, the data collection, aggregation, it's already, I think, a big, don't underestimate the fact that this data, which used to be like in all these different papers you have, now we have it actually in a longitudinal way in a mobile device. It's changed tremendously a lot of things for people. So the challenges were, first of all, to make that happen. As I said, you know, you need to make it easy as possible. These data collections, for example, the microbiome, it's still manual. And obviously, I think that's a challenge. We need to streamline and automatize this kind of process. I think we're not yet there. That's small companies starting working in this area. The other one, as I said, regulation, it's actually moving in the right direction. It's really helping this kind of things. The other one I think you mentioned, which is certainly a very big problem right now, is the education about genomics, right? I work in my entire life using this kind of information in the professional while now I think you need to get it, to expose it, I think, to people. You know, get in, you know, my risk, what are my genetic risks? I think you have no clue. You know, I did my 23andMe 10 years ago, you know, as a part of my company stuff. But now I think I know my risk. And again, educate them, you know, what does it mean 0.0010% of having Alzheimer versus 0.0 5%. We are living in a probabilistic world. Explaining a probability to somebody, you know, whether it's, by the way, whether it's a person or even a doctor, I think it's pretty challenging. But there's a lot of, I think, education, awareness about this. And, you know, with this kind of technology, when you make it easy for people to get it, load it, use it, and see it, then you are going to enable this better education about genomics. So that's one. The second is from the science point of view. Genomics, as I said, it's not just you know your genetic information is going to help you solve your problem, right? It's really about all this translation of this genetic information, I think, to a real like outcome solution, right? I think I'm working in the area of oncology. Now it's a reality. I can actually breast cancer. When I discovered this drug, like 20 years ago in my PhD lab, there was actually 2 subtypes for the breast cancer. Right now, we can, with all this tumor profiling, this genetic profiling, there's 37 actually subtypes, and we can tailor the intervention, I think, for at least 10 now actually different kind of. So it's coming. Still, of course, I think a challenge. The other things, don't be overwhelmed by the challenge of the big data of genomics. Sorry, we are just interested by the variant piece, what makes you different. You know, from me, it's 0.1% to some extent maximum. The 99, I think that to some extent they are not relevant to some of these major conditions, I would say.
Most of the genomics is a black box, right?
I understand. But this is what I'm saying, right? For example, for the CF, again, I think being very down to the earth, there were 200 mutations, right? Having information about this mutation was key. First of all, having it, okay, and this is the kind of mutation I have, and give me all the educational information. For example, we're giving them the information, or there's a clinical trial just going on for that particular mutation you're having, so they can actually be then opt-in, for example, for the clinical trial. No, I'm not saying, I'm not making it simple. It's still a challenge, I think, to educate people about their genetics. But it's more and more now, I think, in the really world about this, all this targeted and personalized medicine. It's happening in particular in oncology, and it's working. Yeah?
Any other questions?
Yeah, just go ahead.
What about privacy? Is there any
Yeah.
risk to the person to have all this data on the mobile, or to try to decide who to sell it to?
Yeah, no, this is, of course, and I guess we are reassured to some extent with this huge battle between Apple and the FBI, right? Just telling you, guys, the most secure, actually, location is actually your mobile device right now, to some extent. But you're right, they always could, you know, it's never going to be like a 100%. I think we are putting all these security standards, basically just to basically protect your data, whether it's in your mobile. Of course, you have this ability to save this data in your private cloud. And again, that's also something, I think, which you can do. But now with the kind of computer we have in hand, really all this data can reside actually in your mobile device. Even the embedded analytics, coming back to the people working in the analytics, is not going to be in a server. It's going to be embedded actually in the native application of the app. Okay, so, and you are going to have all this intelligent, dormant, I would say, or silent, intelligent analytics agent who's going to work for you. You know, oh, I'm looking for all these different biometrics, this different data, and then every time I see a signal, just coming back to this signal processing, it's really a signal detection problem when you have all this aggregated data, and then give you the right, I would say, incentive to act. So it's not going to replace the doctors, of course, right? It's really going to empower you, to inform you about the overall health based in this data, and give you the right actions to do, I think, for the better outcome. But you're right. I think I think the security is as much as you can. There will always be risk. Financial things, it's exactly the same things. You have your mobile application, you're doing all your mobile banking. They got a lot of progress of securing this, but it's not going to be 100%. It's always a risk.
But even risks that you might take by selling that information, so the other entities could have information about you. I don't know.
So this is very important, right? It's anonymized. When we are selling it, when we are getting this information, it's anonymized and aggregated and pooled like in a population. You're like, nobody there. Okay, that's very important, of course. I think we're not selling Christian or Hamid or Adele information. We're selling somebody who has that conditions, which can be pulled out, I think, just to make a project for companies.
It seems to me in one of your outlines in terms of trying to hierarchically organize your information, it seems to me that that's a condition-specific.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in other words, it has to be customized for every single person on Earth.
Every conditions to some extent, I would say.
But that's also.
But this is the area of personalized medicine. That's the reason. And one of the problem actually in the health right now, what they call the population health, right? That basically, even I think during the clinical studies, right, you're just having like a normal population baseline, and then you compare to wherever your patient or condition, basically information, right? It doesn't work actually most of the time, because the baseline of a population is going to be different from the baseline of even a normal guy, I would say. So the idea of this, you're going to have an individual baseline each time. And whatever then the conditions during the progression, whatever his life, the dysfunction is just happening, really the idea now, based in this, the benchmark baseline, how can detect a signal based in all this aggregated data, about the progression of a particular dysfunction, for example. But you're right, it's the era of individualized and personalized medicine.
So if I have 3 conditions, then I need to
but for example, you're in diabetes, or breast cancer, as I said, 37 subtypes. You're going to be one of them, right? And there's going to be specific biometrics that's going to track actually this particular condition. And this is good for the business side, and this is the reason also I was saying we can scale. We designed the technology in a way that can be easily customized to another conditions, other people, other individuals.
It seems to me that there's still quite a bit of, I'm just thinking from a sort of a practical viewpoint, from an analytical viewpoint and everything. It seems to me that the guts of the program itself are going to be fairly very customized to very specific, which is quite a bit of work.
Of course, but I think, but from the technology-wise, Hamid, right now, I think I saw some of this, a lot of work you have been doing in terms of real-time analytics, for example. The technology there is going to enable this kind of things. Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of work, etc. It's more like individual-based kind of analysis than population-based. But the population is always going to play a role, right? I think to some, being, for example, in this community of CF, one of the challenges they have, they cannot actually see each other, because of contamination. It's like a virtual community which is organized, right? So even learning about this community is a challenge right now, how the different personas basically in this community. But you need to look at the individual level. And that's the kind of work which has been done. We're following that for the last 3 years. Then afterwards, we were able to isolated classes of these individuals. And then you can use all the best practices, basically from each class, to address a particular problem, for example. But you're right. I think it's an individual based kind of challenge now.
Any other questions? Well, no. Let's thank our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.